the challenges have been the same for a number of years. What has changed is the accountability to meet those challenges. You have a lot more inexperienced teachers in the classroom today, and they're not used to looking at their classroom as a whole. So some of the things that are happening, for instance, at the moment that have been happening for a while, is that you have a very large English as an additional language population in London. You always have. There are schools that are 85% English as an additional language, otherwise known as EAL, and that impacts on how it is that you use language in the classroom. In terms of special educational needs, that's an interesting one because those special educational needs have always been there. What happened with the Code of Practice in 2014 was that the Code of Practice said, well, basically there are statistically evident things in the population. You're just going to have to assume that these are in your classroom, and so just start to teach like they're in your classroom. Well, for some reason that was sort of new news when a lot of us that have been teaching for a while have known that we've had, you're going to have ADHD kids in the classroom. You're going to have kids who have dyslexia. You're going to have kids who have autism. You're going to have kids who have speech and language needs. But the Code of Practice said to teachers, okay, you're going to have the big four. These are the big four. They're high incidence SENs. Embrace it, plan for it, normalize it. It is normal. The kids sitting in front of the teachers have not changed. What's changed is the way the teachers need to think about fulfilling those needs. So part of what the Code of Practice said from 2014 to 2015 is that these kids are going to be in your classroom. The question is now, how do you fulfill those needs? Technology makes this a lot easier. It's a lot more time saving as a technique at the moment. So you have to have a look at who's in your classroom and think about the overlapping needs, and then go for those sweet spots where you'll have things that will suit a lot of needs at a particular time. Ofsted tells us that outstanding teaching is not outstanding 24/7, but is good most of the time, where the kids are actually making some sort of progress, and teachers have an idea that over a series of lessons, they'll be able to hit all of those needs. Understanding where some of the special needs comes from is really where teachers need to start in terms of figuring out how technology or other techniques are going to fulfill, as I call, those sweet spots. So you have to think about, for instance, cognition and language, how the brain works, and what part of the brain is being affected. And that sounds like, super like rocket science, but it's kind of not. The brain has just a few areas to it. If you have a child who has speech and language needs, they are going to have difficulty pulling the information from this part of the brain with the visual information, with the memory, and getting it down on the paper. If you have a child who has dyslexia, that's pretty similar in terms of them being unable to link up sound and symbol, pull it all together. If you have children who have autism, they might have areas in which they look at very detailed information but can't see the big picture. And again, those things, they might have sensory issues. They might have other things which are barriers. So when you're looking at what's going to hit those spots, you have to think about, there are basically four main approaches. One is being multimodal. So where you're able to combine sound and visual and something for the kids to do, that's going to help quite a lot, because where you have those weaknesses in the brain, you also have relative strengths. Most kids, even if they're weak in terms of how they express or receive language, how they put together sound to word, will be visually strong. So that's where technology is absolutely awesome, because when you can bring up visuals, when you can get the kids up at the board doing things, then you have a chance to tap the strengths in the brain that allow them, because visual is always going to be a strength unless you have obviously a visually impaired child, in which case, it's a different story. So that's one of the sweet spots, multimodal. Another sweet spot is how far you are away. So when the closer you get a child to the board, the smaller the distance it is between the information that they get and when they have to act on it. Which is why generally we have SEN children or other children that kind of need you, like at the front of the front of the room or on the sides of the room where you can get to them easily. When you have children that can just pluck information out of that verbal stream of you talking across the classroom, they can sit anywhere. But when you have kids that can't do that, that have to grab it somehow, have to grab that information and put it down on the sheet as quickly as possible before they forget it, they're the ones that need the most support. So where you put them in the seating plan, how often you get them up to the board to do something, how close they sit to you, since you're the main source of information, what they have in terms of a desk mat, those are all about proximity and essentially about working memory. One of the things I really like about the ViewSonic inclusivity features is one, the ability to change the color background. That's a basic where if I have a child who seems like they're having a cognitive issue and we're not quite sure what it is, the first thing that I do is I look at changing the background, because it could literally just be visual stress. I've had children that can't function unless they specifically can look at lavender or orange or whatever it is. So that's fantastic, and actually you can change it different times during the lesson to hit those needs rather than do all that photocopying. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the immersive reader that ViewSonic has, you can pull out a noun or pull out a verb, you can get a synonym, you can get a picture. I love that. I love the fact that you can pull something up and get a picture on it, because actually for EAL children and for SEN children, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You're helping them to get beyond the barrier of processing language and going straight to the conceptual. Now, a lot of teachers will say, yes, but my subject has concepts that are abstract. Okay, but then you work with the child to figure out how it is you're going to combine images to get that concept across. It's not that these children don't have abstract thinking, but when they get the concretized images down, that abstract thinking is supported in a way that it's not when we're just trying to explain, or have them kind of take that out of the meaning of the words as they're reading it. So the immersive reader is absolutely wonderful. I love it. Language and cognition work together in a really specific way. We have an internal voice that we think with. And so when you have a child's previous education kind of locked up in that internal voice, you need to be able to show them a picture so that they can then pull from their abstract knowledge and apply not only their home language word to it, but the English home language word to it. It's one of the reasons why I talk about visual glossaries. Well, the immersive reader, which allows teachers to kind of pull words out and put a picture to it, is very helpful for that. One of the things that teachers don't have enough of is the background information of a child. And we're getting a lot of refugees. I mean, they've always been refugees in the country, but at the moment with the different conflicts that are going on, you're getting certain groups of refugees that have come in. So those children will have trauma, they'll have other things, which means that learning English quickly enough to keep up with the curriculum is actually quite difficult because they are traumatized, and trauma affects language acquisition. Trauma also affects the parents as well, because the parents have had to uproot and they've had to come. So what the child receives at home is not necessarily as normal an interaction as they could do. When teachers realize that it's not about whether the child speaks English or not, it's about how visual the lesson is and how multimodal the lesson is. So I can get an instruction through to a child by acting it out or by showing a picture rather than, well, I'm just going to wait until you learn English and then I'll be able to teach you. So in that particular way, because I think sometimes newer teachers get a bit panicked, especially when you have lots of languages in the classroom, but remembering that the visual information gets the brain to fire, gets the home language pulled to the front, and then you put the English next to it. And that is absolutely the way to teach those children better, well, inclusively. I think as someone who has been a teacher for over 20 years and who has tried lots of different things, and when I was first starting out, there wasn't a lot of technology out there. I was cutting up my cards and doing that kind of thing. To be in contact with people who have been in front of classrooms and who have decided there must be a better way of doing this, I'm going to figure out how to help other teachers in the way that I wanted to be helped. I find that refreshing, and I find that an incredibly helpful approach. So I like the fact that ViewSonic are people who have been developing educational tech for a long time, who are ex-teachers, who are people that kind of understand the classroom. If you don't understand the classroom, you are just not going to help teachers.